chapter 7. And the sovereign Haman came in. And well, now since Brother David mentioned the connection with Joseph, remember that Joseph, when he became the second to the king, he was taken around the whole kingdom on a horse while everybody had to bow down before him. And something was proclaimed through the whole kingdom regarding him and how he became the second. So this was a similar moment that was done to Mordecai, just like with Joseph on with a new robe of a king. So now chapter 7 verse 1 says, and the sovereign and Haman came in to drink with sovereigness Esther. And again on the second day at the feast of wine, the sovereign said to Esther, what is your petition, sovereigness Esther? And it is given to you. And what is your request? Up to half my reign, and it is done. Third time that he offers half his reign. Like I said, that shows the favor that she found in his eyes, but in the negative sense, the temptation that the enemy would put before her so that she wouldn't say anything about the Yahudim. Now, also, the fact that it says on the second day connects to the fact that after 2 days, like, see how in one of the interpretations we were talking about how Hillel wanted everything that Mashiach got through his death and resurrection, just like in the previous chapter, Haman wanted everything, but he ended up giving it by the order of the king, the representation of Yahweh, to Mordecai. Now it says here, mentions a second day, as in after 2 days, after 2 millenniums, there's a feast, and the congregation is about to make a petition. So, and again, on the second day at the feast of wine, the sovereign said to Esther, what is your petition, sovereigness Esther? And it is given to you. And what is your request? Up to half my reign, and it is done. And sovereigness Esther answered and said, if I have found favor in your eyes, O sovereign, and if it pleases the sovereign, let my life be given me at my petition and my people at my request. So imagine how weird this petition was for, and once again, she's using a lot of wisdom because she wants the king to actually think about it. Like, what is she talking about? Why is she asking for her life if I already extended the scepter when she entered a couple of days ago? Why is she asking for her own life and the life of her people? What does she mean? Right? So it says, in sovereignness, Esther answered and said, if I have found favor in your eyes, O sovereign, and if it pleases the sovereign, let my life be given me at my petition and my people at my request. For we have been sold, my people and I. Remember that Mashiach was sold by the, by Judas, right? By Yehuda. And they killed him. It could be said that because of the fact that the people of Yahweh bought Mashiach in order to kill him, the people of the Yahudim now would be sold to the enemy. And that is why the last has to come to die on Yom Kippur to atone for it and in a way bring redemption. For remember that the book of Ruth speaks of two redeemers, one whose name is hidden and one who's called Boaz. We know there are two pillars in the temple, Yakin and Boaz. So the one who's hidden, who happens to be called the first redeemer in the book of Ruth, when we read it in Hebrew, the first redeemer, Peloni Almoni, as it is called in Hebrew, whose name is hidden, he represents the first, Yahushua, the first redeemer, and therefore the pillar called, the column called Yakin. Yet the other one is Boaz, like the Boaz of the story, who is the second redeemer. So we see here that it says, for we have been sold. That's why they need redemption. My people and I, to be cut off, to be killed, and to be destroyed. Look how it says three things: cut off, killed, destroyed. Remember that the many who will be cut off, killed, and destroyed on the great tribulation that will last 30 days, according to Hosea 5:7, that time in which the many will die. Like I just said, in a month, 30 days, cut off, be killed, be destroyed. The few, the chosen few who will be transformed, represented by Esther, are represented by the number 1. The many who will be killed during the great tribulation are represented by the number 3. So it's interesting that when she talks about the death of the people, she mentions 3 different ways: to be cut off, to be killed, and to be destroyed. And if we had been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept silent, although the adversary could not make up for the sovereign's loss. So she says, but even if we would have been given our lives and just allowed to be slaves, I would keep quiet, right? Kind of like saying, if what happened in Egypt was the same that was happening now, I would keep quiet and take it. But it is even worse than that. They want to kill us all. So I have to speak up. And it says, although the adversary could not make up for the sovereign's loss, there's no way that the king Ahasuerus could make up the loss of the nation of Israel from his kingdom or the world itself, for he was the king of the world at the moment through this world empire. Because pretty much according to what scripture says, and when we understand it in the spiritual sense, this earth was created for the law to be fulfilled according to the true fulfillment of the spirit. And that means that only the people of Yahweh fulfill that law. So if the people of Yahweh are taken from this reality, then there is no purpose for this reality, and it would cease to exist. And that is why the laws would be great if the people of Yahweh would be taken out, for everything else would be lost other than the people of Yahweh, meaning creation itself. The same, well, that is why we are called the salt of the earth. Salt preserves. So those who follow the commandments of Yahweh are the one who are preserving the earth. So if they are taken out, the earth will be destroyed. And that's why once the chosen few are harvested as the wheat and the many as the grapes in the winepress of the wrath, then the last 7 plagues happen. And then the kingdom will be established so that this will remain. Sovereign Ahasuerus asked Sovereigness Esther, who is he and where is he whose heart is set to do so? So imagine this moment when Esther is saying this. The only one who knows about it is Haman, who just went through what he went through with Mordecai and his daughter, as Judaism says. And now he realizes that the king is angry at somebody, and that somebody is him. And Esther is the one who will reveal it. The sovereign Ahasuerus asked Sovereigness Esther, who is he and where is he whose heart is set to do so? And Esther said, the adversary and enemy is this evil Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the sovereign and sovereignness. For sure, imagine the situation in which he was. Verse 6, and she said, Esther, the man, the enemy, Tsar, an adversary or adversary and enemy, Be'oyeb, Haman. And Esther said, the adversary and enemy is this evil Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the sovereign and sovereignness. So we see how the same scripture says pretty much that Haman is a representation of the adversary, of the enemy, as Halel and Azazel. And the sovereign, arising in his wrath from the feast of wine, went into the palace garden, and Haman remained before Sovereigness Esther, pleading for his life, for he saw that evil had been decided against him by the sovereign. So the king just got up and went out because he was too angry and he needed to think about what to do. And the sovereign, arising in his wrath So that, as I was saying, represents the time when the wrath of Yahweh will manifest. From the feast of wine, which, remember, like I said, the many who will be killed are the grapes who will be thrown in the wine press of the wrath, and then the wine that comes out of the wine press will be the one filling the 7 bowls of wrath that will be poured on the earth. So interesting that his wrath from the feast of wine. So he got up with a lot of wrath, for the wrath of Yahweh will manifest after the winepress of the wrath fills the 7 bowls of wrath. Went into the palace garden, and Haman remained before sovereigness Esther. So he thought that he could convince her. It is said that in Judaism, it is said that Haman wanted to plead before her. He wanted to get on his knees, but when he was about to do so, he tripped and fell on top of her. So when the king entered, well, I think I'm already getting ahead of myself. I'll just read. And Haman remained before sovereigness Esther, pleading for his life, for he saw that evil had been decided against him by the sovereign. And when the sovereign returned from the palace garden to the place of the feast of wine, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was. So he wanted to plead and he wanted to get on his knees, but he fell. So he fell on the couch where Esther was. Then the sovereign, who saw that, said, also to ravish the sovereigness while I am in the house? Right? So he thought, so you actually want to even rape her? You want to ravish the sovereigness while I am in the house? As the word left the sovereign's mouth, they cover Haman's face. So when he went in, he saw that he was falling on the couch. So he thought, oh, you actually are going to do that in front of me in my own palace? That is just too much. So at that moment, as the word left the sovereign's mouth, they covered Haman's face. The servants went in, covered his face, which meant you are going to be killed. All right, let me see something here. Here, the word kabash, 322. To force, keep under, bring to bondage, subdue. It's interesting that this same lettering, these 3 letters, let me go back or front and see if they, here it is, kebes is lamb, sheep, young ram. So the same writing, here we have kebesh. Well, in fact, they would say kebes, but the shin, some say, receive that sound of an S later on. And here we have kabash, which would be a verb that says he subdued. So as we know, the kebes, the sheep, is the congregation. And the enemy wants to subdue the congregation as a sheep, which we see right in the same word. Harbonah, one of the eunuchs, said to the sovereign, also, see, this is amazing. And in Judaism, it is said that this was actually an angel who brought the message as Harbonah. It could be Harbonah being inspired by the Ruach or by an angel. And Harbonah, one of the eunuchs, said to the sovereign, also see the wooden structure, 50 cubits high, which Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke good on behalf of the sovereign, is standing at the house of Haman. And the sovereign said, impale him on it. So this is amazing. The wooden structure that Haman had built to kill Mordecai was now going to be used to kill Haman himself. So he built his own trap. He built his own death trap. And that is what Satan did as well, by killing Mashiach and then by killing the last. And the witness Eliyahu, of course, also. Which Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke good on behalf of the sovereign. Let me see. Harbonah, one of the eunuchs, said to the sovereign, also see the wooden structure 50 cubits high. The 50 will be kind of important later on because it connects with the Jubilee when this will happen and the chosen will be redeemed from having been sold to the enemy. But also it connects with the 50 days that are after the 49 of from the first day of the Omer to Shavuot, we need to count 49 days, and then the 50th is Shavuot. So it connects with Shavuot. And in a way, I believe this feast does connect with Shavuot in a different way that we would expect or how it represents it, but we will see it later on as we read a little bit more. So 50 cubits high, which Haman made for Mordechai, who spoke good on behalf of the sovereign. Also, the 50 is the numerical value of the letter Nun, a letter. And that letter represents the last, represents the heir to the throne, represents one who fell, represents a seed, and it's called Nun. And remember that the last is a descendant of Nun. Ephraim, in his line came somebody who was called Nun, and he had Hoshea, who then got his name changed to Yahushua, to represent that in the same line would come the last, who then would become Yahushua by becoming one with him after resurrecting. And you see the Nun, and you see here how it says 50, and it says the name Nun. So going back, 50 cubits high, which Haman made for Mordechai, who spoke good on behalf of the sovereign. And you see how the Harbonah, the eunuch, knew about it, which Haman made for Mordechai. He made especially for him. He wanted to kill him. I don't know if you knew, but he wanted to kill him. For we know from what we have read that Haman never got to ask for the life of Mordechai. So somehow Harbonah came to know, perhaps through Esther, or through the angel, like I said, as they say in Judaism. So which Haman made for Mordechai, he gives the message to the king, who spoke good on behalf of the sovereign, right, to save his life. He's standing at the house of Haman. And the sovereign said, impale him on it. Impale him on it. And they hanged Haman on the wooden structure. Vayitlu et Haman al ha'etz. And they hanged Haman on the on wood, on the tree would be translated more literal. That he had prepared for Mordechai. And the sovereign's wrath abated. This is huge because we see that in scriptures, in Revelation, we see that after the 7 plagues happen, after the last plagues, the 7 bowls of wrath happen, then Yahweh's anger will stop and he won't get angry ever again. So this is what is being represented here. Pretty much when the enemy is finally condemned, taken out, then Yahweh won't get angry ever again. Why? Because it was the enemy, both through an outside influence and within, through the flesh, the inclination to do evil. It is through those 2 means, like Hillel and Samael, that we would tempt humans. So once we are transformed in the body, there is no inclination to do evil. And once the enemy is put in a cell in the lake of fire, before it will be inhaled, then the lake of fire after the millennium, then there will be no influence from the enemy from within or without, right? There will be no influence inside of our mind, of the flesh, nor outside through the ears or no other way. And that is what this is being this represents right here. When the enemy pays for what he did to Mashiach, in a way, I mean, we could say in the same way, but what I mean by in the same way is in a just or for him to suffer what he tried to make Mashiach suffer. And I say try because Mashiach got resurrected and now reigns, and that suffering that he went through, although is unimaginable, he is now satisfied even of it, because of what he would bring, the fruit that he would bring, as it is written in scriptures. So this is how the chapter ends.